All right, attempt 6. Let's go. So I was having a conversation with some people at some point, and I said that AI was a really good tool for deck building, the context being Magic the Gathering, so like playing card game. And Homie Slice was like, no, I have contradicting information. He lists the troubles that he had using AI, and he told us that one of the errors was it said certain cards weren't banned when they were banned. He told it, like, no, those cards are banned, and it was like, hey, you're right, no, those are actually banned, yeah, and other such things. But what I want to express here is that his perspective is not actually contradictory to my perspective, and the conversation is actually just that he would not express his perspective in the same manner as I would express mine. So to go back to my perspective, a tool doesn't need to be like a one-stop shop for completing an entire project. So like when I say AI is a really good tool, that's completely true in the same way that a hammer is a really good tool for like deck building. A hammer is, really good at hammering in nails, but pretty terrible at like sawing wood or hauling things. AI is really good at scraping the data it's trained on. So it having access to a database of magic cards, gatherer.wizards.com, means it can perform a lot more and a lot more complicated searches at an incomparable speed relative to a single person doing it manually. So if you go to AI and you prompt it and you have it format its response into text you can copy and paste into a website like I use Tapped Out, or you can use Scryfall or whatever have you, rather than look at like dozens of searches manually over these like 30,000, 29,000, whatever amount of cards, you might only need to just prompt, then copy and paste and look at a few hundred cards. So this is the equivalent of there being a nail and there being a hammer. So, given my perspective, I would say it is a really good tool. That is what I would call it. Given his perspective of it now being unreliable or incapable of doing the tasks he tried to use for, he would not call it a really good tool. This is because we're both using the same language of whether or not something is a really good tool, but we have very different concepts of what constitutes a good tool. We're using the same language, but we're communicating very different things. In this way, I would not say I was contradicted at all. Now, this isn't a particularly big issue in this specific regard, speaking for myself, not for him, obviously, but the same rationality can be applied to other events or situations where it can or it might very well be like incredibly impactful to the people involved. One example would be like the term best friend. So in my past, I went from not calling anyone a friend to only calling one specific person a friend to labeling a best friend to, having many besties. But in more recent years, I've dropped that language from my vocabulary almost entirely, quote unquote, dropped it almost entirely. And this, to me, is largely because the concept of best generally communicates like greater than, and that language isn't really useful for expressing my internal experiences or thoughts or whatever have you, like contextually. So I get brought more or less joy by different people, but someone that brings me no joy might, bring me knowledge or other, valuable aspects. I might feel very strongly about some people, but they might only show up in my life every now and then or for less time. So on average, I might feel very strongly about other people relative to that, weighted time value of how strong you feel or whatnot, about how consistently you interact with. But ultimately, none of these dynamics are necessarily ones I think I should compare to one another because they can't be compared in any way that I find particularly meaningful. So when other people use language like best friend, it doesn't communicate a huge amount to me, and I'll have to ask other questions because otherwise it's very likely that we're going to be talking about like very different concepts and just using the same language. So this is overall a concept I've expressed in a fair few different videos in different times, different ways. Now, I've done videos, blogs, poetry, stories, conversations I've had, projects I've done. And it's derived from a pet peeve of mine about my inability to feel understood and my struggle with those from which I don't perceive effort to understand me. But anyways, that's the big thing. That's a little tangent then. There you go. I love you. Have a good day. Goodbye.